Good afternoon, everyone. Right. I love it when it's an interactive conversation that we're going to be happening here. So I want to welcome you to the Carter G. Woodson Institute for African American and African Studies to honor and celebrate one of our own as a fellow and as a faculty. My name is Robert Trent Vincent. I'm the Director and Chair of the Carter G. Woodson Institute. And it is my real pleasure, one, to be in person again, to the extent that we can, to celebrate our faculty and their wonderful scholarship. The last time we were able to do this, to celebrate a faculty member's publication was Nichelle Hamilton's Phonographic Memories. And that was February 2019? September of 2019, so just before the pandemic. So we are able to celebrate the fact that we are able to continue, restart this Woodson tradition of honoring and celebrating wonderful scholarship that comes through these doors. It is my distinct pleasure, and I promise that I will not embarrass you, to introduce Kwame Edwin Otu. Dr. Kwame Edwin Otu. Which, as I alluded to earlier, is part of the Woodson family, going back more than 10 years now. Just about. Woodson Fellow, Doctoral Fellow, and transitioned to the faculty. It is wonderful to have Professor Kwame Otu, Assistant Professor of African American Studies. She is also, and I want to honor the words that Kwame wrote. Sometimes write the words you wanted me to say for his bio, so I should read the words. And then I will proceed to say more things that might embarrass him. He is also the current Assistant Professor of Public Health at UVA's Center for Global Health Equity. He is the author of this wonderful book, Amphibious Subjects, Sasso and the Contested Politics of Queer-making, Self-making, and Neoliberal Economy. And it just came out just this past July from the University of California Press. You can find his writings everywhere, including in Feminist Africa, Journal of Critical Ethnic Studies, Sexualities, Body and Religion, Journal of African Cultural Studies, Journal of Queer World Making, etc., etc., etc. Kwame Edwin Otu is also my friend, my dear friend. He's a beloved colleague, an inspiring teacher. You know, walking with Kwame across grounds, like this, grounds, right? Sounds very austere, right? Which is not Kwame, right? Because he's very open and warm and receptive. And we know this because a 5-minute walk, let's say, to Newcomb Hall, takes 20 minutes because all the students he's had stop and talk to him, and then he's talking with them, and he's recalling specifics about who they are in their lives, certain situations. That just lets folks know he cares. He remembers. And it's a wonderful thing to walk across grounds with the mayor. So I'm going to make you embarrassed. But I hope to convey in this long, short introduction what high esteem you are held. All of us to come and celebrate this wonderful work and to witness you lead this wonderful panel. Your federal panelists that you will introduce. My brother, the stage is yours. Audience, I offer you Dr. Kwame.
fellows in the room. So good evening, everybody. I'm still around. For those of you who have not seen me, I just want to what a joy to be back in a space animated by the enchanting company of activists, intellectuals, both students and professors, and non-academic colleagues whose efforts hold together this calculated structure and coming in this space. It is also absolutely nourishing to be in the presence of my friends and loved ones here online. I'm not just utterly enjoyed, but also very loved. Let me begin first by thanking the community of Sasso whose lives have made this occasion possible, and without whom I would not have embarked on this project in the way I did. Today we are fortunate to have in our midst members of this community who have traveled from near and far. They have left their jobs and families to share in the joys that the lunch of this affords. Unfortunately, some of the Sasso whom I would have liked to have been here cannot because they have passed on. And here I'm thinking of Hillary and Siki, two remarkable individuals whose contributions to the Sasso and their community in Ghana will continue to transcend it. And to Kakra, or Francis Butcher, affectionately known. To Nelson White, I extend my love and sincerest gratitude. And of course, I'm not going to leave you out of consideration. In various capacities, you and the members of the Sasso community have been with me through this ethnographic exercise from its inception in 2011 to date. And many thanks to my colleagues and staff at the Wilson Institute for African American and African Studies too. And those beyond the Wilson and the walls of UVA. You constitute the solid rock I stood on and I continue to stand on. I also can't thank enough the then chair of the Carnegie Wilson Institute, Professor Deborah McDowell, and the now chair, Professor Robert Vincent, as well as the staff at the best, Randy Swift, James Stella, our student interns, Carla Malachi, and Sawyer, and to my colleagues who have been with me through this journey. Writing a book is not a joke. It is not a joke, it is lonely, especially when that book is being written in the age of pandemic. While I'm on the Muslim street, I would like to share how my presence as a pre-doctoral fellow from 2014 to 2016 significantly shaped the coordinates and the contours of this project. To Professor Deborah McDowell again, who read substantial sections of the dissertation in the manuscript, and to my fellows, who for 2 years had to deal with the painstaking yet beloved exercise of reading my work in the fellowship workshops. I say a huge thanks to now the fellowship workshops are remarkable. So don't take offense, it's not personal when you are getting feedback. The feedback is intended to provide you with the needed vitamins for your intellectual growth. And here I would like to thank Xavier, Livermore, and Jemima, or Jerry, I'm not forgetting about you, for being phenomenal interlocutors. My unquantifiable thanks to Marlon Bailey and Jeffrey McHugh, the editors of the New Sexual World series, and the staff at the California Press for putting this book at home. The genesis of this book was sparked by my desire to understand the omission of homosexual presence in Africa in a course I enrolled in while in graduate school in 2009. The course was called Culture and AIDS, focused mainly on how culture shapes society's reception to the HIV and AIDS pandemic group. The course's section on AIDS in Africa offered a perspective that emphasized the transmission, the heterosexual transmission of HIV/AIDS in Africa. I was quite befuddled by the heterosexualization of HIV and AIDS, not least because it omitted the presence of homosexuality, but it reinforced the racist Pavlovian representations that suggested that homosexuality was imported into Africa from the West. It is in the infamous statement by the then president of Zimbabwe, regard that homosexuality is a white man's disease, that this erasure becomes topical. Understanding then that there were homosexuals in Africa using my body as a barometer, I was compelled to challenge the assertion of a heterosexual African, an assertion that had long been parroted by hetero-nationalist leaders. This challenge opened up the ethnographic vista, leading to the pursuit of the fieldwork that produced the dissertation from which this book was born. Frankly speaking, I did not know then of the term Sasso, nor was I familiar with the communities of self-identified effeminate men and the various organizations that work with them. Ethnography, however, sometimes makes the possible precisely because it allows one to craft relationships. In other words, ethnography's most crucial ingredient, I suggest or argue, can be found in building relationships in the likeliest or unlikeliest places. How to arrive at and discuss the taboo topic of homosexuality in a place that forbids the presence of homosexuality? Somehow I did, thanks to this wonderful people. In 2011, at the very beginning of my fieldwork, I was able to find this Sasso community through a conversation with a professor at the University of Ghana. She disclosed furtively to me then that she had a student working at Ghana's National HIV/AIDS Control Program. And the student had been working on men who have sex with men, which is a vocabulary often deployed by public health interventions organizations in Ghana. This revelation will not only introduce me to Sasso, whose life was animated the previous of this book at National HIV/AIDS Control Office, but will also discursively orient my understanding of queer self-passion in Ghana. Right, so the fact that I arrived at Amphibious personally was because of my interaction with these men, and the fact that they gave me an intuition of sexual subjectivity that I was quite unfamiliar with as a Ghanaian, but also very unfamiliar with as someone who had been in the US for over a decade. Today, we are here. We are here because of these wonderful, gorgeous, illustrious men who have clearly made this room look colorful. So now I'll be very honored to introduce them, and I'll start with Wisdom Berkeley. Wisdom is the Executive Director of Solace Initiative and the Executive Secretary of for the Alliance for Equality and Diversity, the coalition of LGBT organizations and students in Ghana. Currently wise, as I affectionately call him, because he is also very wise. He's based in the US and works at the Institute for the Study of Human Rights at Columbia University. Now, Godfred Asante is an assistant professor of communication, difference and disparities as an Diego State University in the USA. Godfred has a PhD in intercultural communication from the University of New Mexico. He earned his BA in rhetoric from the University of Minnesota, Morris, and his MA in communication studies from Minnesota State University, Mankato. His research examines the notion of LGBT empowerment in West Africa. In doing so, he collaborates with human rights NGOs using participatory action research methodologies to investigate a range of social issues caused by the criminalization of same-sex sexual relations in West Africa. So sometimes I regard Godfred as a renegade anthropologist. Now, Francis Boache, whom we regard as our queen, I'm thinking we call her Hajia of the day, because you are our Hajia. Is currently the Executive Director of Priorities on Rights and Sexual Health Ghana, known as Bosch, which prioritizes sexual health for sexual minorities, including Sasso in post-colonial Ghana. And finally, Samuel Nelson Azuma, who was the project coordinator. Samuel Nelson was my what do you call it in anthropology? Gatekeeper. I hate that term, was the coordinator of the Human Rights Advocacy Center, one of the very first organizations to address health issues in Ghana. Among other things, Nelson coordinated projects ranging from access to health for sexual minorities, access to justice, and many more projects that dealt with mainstream human rights in the LGBT community in particular, and the gender human rights community in general. Currently, Nelson is a final year student at Essex County College in New Jersey. Without further ado, please kindly welcome his nephew. So I think this is how it's going to unfold. I'm going to ask Francis to start by sharing his own experience as the director of Porsche, and also as a assistant. Because I begin with Francis because Francis is actually, quite frankly, one of the historic figures known of us in LGBT human rights activism. And I'd like Francis to speak to the ways in which the landscapes of LGBT activism in Ghana have changed based on your own experience, not only as someone who self-identifies as a but someone who's at the forefront of LGBT human rights activism and public health and promotion among their communities.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Otu. And I thank you for coming to listen to us and then share ideas. Where do I start from? I think Sasso, the book we talk about it, the thing Sasso would confuse a lot of people, but it literally means my kind, my sister, my brother, you are my kind. So that's it. So my background wasn't in human rights and HIV or whatever. Art, literature, drama, and all that. But then, coming out of university and working in the radio station, working in the real estate agencies and all that, selling big houses and all that, I realized there was one thing that was just running through that everywhere you go, I mean, there's some touch that people see and try to, pull you back or just halt you. Just say, stop. How are you talking like this? Stop. I'm selling my house. What has talking got to do with my house? I'm moving, I'm on the radio, I'm doing my program. What has my whatever got to do with it? So I realized wherever you go, you will still have to address the same thing that whoever cares. I mean, so let me just branch off and do what I do. And do what I do, to practice what I do and work on it. And then I also try to solve the issues. I realized there was so many people suffering that would I say stigma or phobia or religious, whatever the people were using to discriminate. So that's how come I formed Paris of Life and Society. Just manage some of these cases and then also get into the struggle for the rights against HIV, which he addressed as very, very precarious in Ghana at that time. It's still very good. So the journey so far, now we have Twitter, we have Instagram, we have social media. When we started, there wasn't TV. There used to be phones like that. And you have to call, run, sneak into somewhere to call your boyfriend or to call your sister or whatever, and then talk under tone and all that. Way you didn't have the chance to make the call. And so times have changed, plus social media. And so the activism space is also a bit radical now in Ghana. We used to do radicalism on the ground, like physically, but now people can really do cyber activism and really call you out and call the president of Ghana, call the minister, troll you seriously and you withdraw your statement and all that. So the journey has been very tortuous, very hard. I mean, we started with all the people sitting here, we started from the University of Ghana campus. University of Ghana was also a very fertile ground for activism and shaped us to be where we are now. And so, yes, so the journey so far has been tortuous, but we have seen a lot of successes and a lot of remarks have been made remarkable achievements have been made over the period. So, so far, so good. And I will continue.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Thank you all for coming. I want to start by talking about two very important people that Dr. Kwame Tuak mentioned in his intro. They were more, I would say, getting exposed and trying to get to know who I really was in the community that I grew up. They were very protective of me, and because they were very visible in the community, out of the community, in Ghana, out of Ghana. And so I grew up with these two people that when you take time to read, I'm sure he had mentioned a lot about them, were the very people that gave me the exposure to really be able to navigate in the area of LGBT advocacy work, in the area of health and human rights. I grew up in a family where my mom wouldn't want to talk about it, but it's okay for her to talk about it with these two friends of mine. It's okay for her to accommodate them and have them around and eat, but it's kind of like very tricky for her to talk about the issue of Sasso with me, and wouldn't like the fact that the word Sasso is associated to his son, that the son is who people think he is. I grew up in a community where it's very friendly when it comes to LGBTQs. They were more accommodating, but this same community at some point along the line will just change, will just hit on the whole community, go after the LGBT community, and there's a whole mob attack on some key people that they have lived with them all their life. The same community will have other LGBT community people from across the country coming and hosting them. These two people again will throw all the parties, and you get to see all the Sasui from all over Ghana coming around because they feel safe and will dress in all kinds of dressing and will throw themselves and will do all the beautiful things. Um, like I said earlier, I've participated in a lot of advocacy work, trying to empower the community to really enforce on their rights, know their rights, because of these two people. And unfortunately, they are no more here with us. And I recently went home and I had to pay visit to one of them, their tomb. May their soul rest in peace. These were two people, like I said, they are very, very visible, and they will say out of this, they will come out out of this, and they have no kind of educational background, they don't have the degrees, but they'll sit at the round table with the academia and say and tell them, we wanted to own this, we want to be part of the process, we want you to involve us because we have the message, we are the grassroots community, and you cannot just sit there and couch things and try to fabricate things. Come to us. Let us tell you what it is, how it is on the ground with us. I have worked with HRC, one of the leading organizations that have worked with the community, and I've led projects, and also I've now given the CEOs, that is the community-based organizations, to be able to do the advocacy themselves, help them to form alliance, and now there's a lot being done. I'm pretty sure Wisdom here and Kakra had said it. There's a lot going on, and so it is important that we reach out to them to be able to reach out to the community and be able to give them the necessary resources and information or education that they need to be able to get informed and be able to stand and advocate for themselves. Currently, I know there's a bill in Parliament, and it's a back and forth kind of thing. The CDOs on the ground need that capacity to be able to challenge the members of Parliament. And so it is a lot, but there's a lot going on. I know they are not resting. I am here. I'm giving all the. I live here. I'm giving all the support that I need. And so, as people in the academic area field, whatever resources, whatever help you think will be beneficial to them to be able to address the issues as it is. Let's talk to them after. Whilst we're having the reception, let's talk to them and see how best we can help them out there. I'm gonna. Yeah, you could. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for honoring the invitation and coming. And I'm also happy to be here to be on this panel. I don't know where to start from, but I'm getting emotional because I'm a testimony for these two, and then the two that was mentioned in the book because they discovered me. And I personally, I grew up from the grassroots community where gay people and especially gay men who do not have access to basic amenities, basic healthcare, and all of that. And I grew up in a very hostile community where LGBT issues or gay issues are not openly discussed. I grew up in a Muslim-dominated community where I grew up from. And even though I grew up from there, I was a very timid person. And growing up, you know you are different, you know you are different. And so whilst I was growing up, I was speaking some of the hostile things that were around the environment. Those things really gave me a very tough skin to be able to live in that environment for over 20 years, over 20 years in that environment. And living in such environment where people are cruel, where people verbally abuse you because of your mannerism, because of your gestures, because of who you represent. When they see you, they verbally abuse you. You accommodate all these things and grow in these things and become a very tough person. And then along the way, I was discovered by Siki, who is mentioned in the book. They needed somebody to be an advocate or a community person, to a peer educator to give health intervention programs to gay people in the community. And I knew I was very timid, and I didn't know what happened. But when Siki discovered me, he just gave my name and my number, and then I received the call. I don't know what came over me, but I just answered the call and went to the training. And I learned a lot. It was where I was able to really discover myself and some of the sexual behaviors in the gay community. And so I learned, and then I came back. Then I had to come and give back to the community. So I came back to the community, giving peer education. Then you have to mobilize gay men, which is also difficult. And so we have a strategy. We were given a strategy to reach out to gay men. And so it's whom you know, like a snowball rolling. And so whom you know will take you to their friends, and then you get the community. And then I happened to have like a first outreach group discussion, which I took outside of the community to gather all these people that I've met and have like a one-on-one conversation and health intervention for how they can access healthcare, how they can, during their sexual behavior, how they can protect themselves and all of that. And so after that, you have to bring in a nurse to come and give like counseling and testing on HIV and AIDS. And so the first outreach that I had, we had the outreach, I did the education, the nurse took the participant through counseling and 3 of them tested. And then 2 people out of the first outreach I had reached out to me after the gathering, and then one came up to me and said, okay, so this is what the nurse is saying. She's telling me that you have to give me a referral. And if you give me a referral, you have to take him to see the nurse. I said, okay. And then the second thing, he told me, okay, so I am reactive to HIV. I can't handle this all by myself. You called me to come here. And so since I am here, you are the one who are going to take care of me. Because I can't deal with this alone. Because all this comes, with stigma, discrimination. You can't talk to anybody because of your sexuality. And so if that person is HIV, where is it supposed to go? So the person has to, you are going to be my company. The second person came and told me, okay, listen, this is what the nurse is saying. I'm reacting to HIV. You called me here. I'm not going to leave you alone. You are going to be my company. And then that day, I went home, started thinking about how many lives I'm going to be saving if I continue with this work. And that is where the passion began for me. And so I kept on continuing and educating people, referring to the community, because we are all at risk. Because if a brother has it, I'm also in the community, anything can happen. And so we started referring people to to access help and everything. So that's how it started for me, and I started building a tough skin. When people go to access healthcare, there is stigma and discrimination. And so what do? We have to sit around the table, start discussing human rights issues. And that is where we started discussing human rights issues, and then involving changing from like men who have sex to men to LGBTIQ human rights. And so that is how we started building or started the advocacy around LGBTIQ human rights, even though we started with health intervention programs to start discussing LGBTIQ human rights. And that is how we started building ourselves, gathering ourselves with the help of all the people and the nurses that are supportive, some who are supportive as allies who receive cases of LGBT gay men who access help for STI infections and the rest. That's how we started building the community, and this is where we've got into now. And then organizations started springing up because people became bold, people became very strong because of the few advocacy, the fundamental human rights that's enshrined in the Constitution that we are using to advocate for themselves, for the community. They are using that and strengthening empowering themselves and coming out to speak for themselves. And so it is out of this that we started getting more vocal people who are speaking against some of the human rights issues that have been mentioned on them, both violently or physically. And so that's how the others also became activists and advocates. And then we began to talk about movements. And then in the movement building, we have to now differentiate the lesbian movement, the gay movement, the trans movement, the LBQ movement. Things started springing up. And so now we have over 24 even with the bill, we have over 24 LGBT-led organizations that have come up, which is a very great improvement since the last 10 years when we started, because there was only one organization that was LGBT, not LGBT, but health intervention led. And then they were only also into gay men work. And so it was out of this that all these organizations came up. And HRSD was a very open NGO, human rights NGO, who deals with all sort of human rights. And then they created a desk for LGBT to address LGBTIQ issues. And that's where we all also champion more strength from. And I also passed through that, because after my university, I went to, I did my national service at the HRSC, and that is where I explored the various sort of human rights, or disability rights, women's rights, child rights, and all of that. We had a human rights clinic, and it was interesting to work there, because when there is issues of violence for the LGBTIQ community, I mean, they call our office, because the HRSC has been very open to the community. And so when they call, it's either me or Nelson. And we had, there was the head of, the human rights clinic had the head, where, I mean, immediately we hear LGBTIQ person has been violated, we move. We go into the police stations, we go create noise, because most of the police people, are very ignorant to the issues around LGBT, which I know will be a question for discussion when we move on. And so that is how we radically moved in to fight for the community. And we had great allies who were also moving with us to be able to empower the community. And I mean, all these organizations that I've mentioned are in one way or the other working hard to ensure that the small movement that we are building become a very broader movement, bring ourselves together to fight this fight. And over the past 3 years has been very difficult with the introduction of the bill, which I'm sure a lot of you have read on the internet and all of that. The bill is in Parliament and it's going through all the processes. And the parliamentarians are putting a lot of pressure to the Speaker of Parliament, or the committee that has been set up to review the proposed bill, to make sure that they pass the bill. And so that is where we are currently at. The committee has finished their report and everything, but now it's left how they present it in Parliament for whatever they want to do. And as we speak, a lot of violence have gone since the introduction of the bill. And we are here to keep receiving calls, keep trying our best to address some of the issues on our own way, because when we call on this, the supposed people who are supposed to be law protecting human beings are the people who are against the community because of ignorance sometimes. And so we have to step in radically to ensure that we fight. And one of the things that we do is that we make sure we seek justice for our own. If justice is not going to be given to the victim, we make sure that the victim is out of their hands, because if the victim is in their hands, then it becomes a very big problem for us as activists or advocates on the ground. And yeah, so that is where we are now. We have a bill currently in front of us, and we are working hard, putting in a lot of strategies to ensure that the bill doesn't pass. But I mean, we are all optimistic that how homophobic the bill itself is, and the people behind the bill is, it will pass. Whether it passes or not, we don't know. And so we are still in the fight. We keep engaging international people, international donors at the levels, various levels, who are also very supportive in terms of giving us strategies. So this is where we are now. And I know that we have a lot of questions to ask, and then we'll continue. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That's so much for this.
Yes, I'll be brief. Thanks so much again. I'm sure that you've heard some of these things. Thanks so much for this is very nostalgic for me. From the University of Ghana, we would always magically always end up in Kirker's room somehow. Across the campus, we were spread across campus. However, somehow magically we just all end up in his room, just seeking belonging, seeking a place to talk about what was happening. And so his room became the place where we would sort of always end up, and he would always reassure us whenever something happened with roommates or just that roommate that was eyeing you or talking to this other person. And he would just give us all this confidence. Like he will really push all those very thoughts away. And something that really I sort of remember also from when we were in college was just comedy. We just made fun of our pain. And today, it's very interesting whenever, now, sometimes we just laugh. And there was a time I was talking to some friends of mine in San Diego, and I was laughing about some guy, a friend of ours who was beaten up, and I was like, that's so sad. I'm like, but then I was like, why are you laughing? This guy was beaten up, but we always laugh at these things. And so these were some of the things that I as a researcher, I was really beginning to think about this kind of sexual subjectivity that we had that was in some way a little bit different from the kind of queers that I encountered within the United States. And so for me, for instance, grew up in a Pentecostal home. My mother is a preacher. And so my queerness was kind of absorbed within that element. I sung in church, and so there was less of a scrutiny there. But I knew, of course, I was queer. And so, but one thing that really sort of stood out to me, of course, going to college, going to the University of Ghana, meeting these wonderful people, and really igniting this passion for advocacy, actually. And so, a part of when I moved to the U.S., something that really sort of made me, sort of pushed me to start thinking about my own body, my own kind of queerness, and how different it was. And actually what that also meant for myself, what that meant for the folks in Ghana who have now who are receiving and have received a lot of help from international partners, what kind of epistemological framework is being transported, and which perhaps helps and sometimes does not. And so I began to really think about the kind of fractures. What were some of the fractures with LGBT rights in particular, and also the kind of queerness that was in the US. And so really, this is beautiful. I'm really excited to finish reading your book, but I'm really excited that this is occurring right now, because this is definitely unthinkable. And I think also this is sort of a continuation and a reflection of the kind of camaraderie that we created back in the University of Ghana about 20 years ago. Even though we are all spread across the world, we've always found the time, the space to connect, because that was the center of how we survived. That you connected with each other, you reached out to each other, you were very vulnerable with each other. So I really love the story of your friend telling you, I'm with you now, I'm not going away. You got me here and that's it. I think that's really a great reflection of the kind of connection that we built across the board. So I will just end here. I know we have a lot of questions and a lot of things to talk about. So I'll end here and eventually we can come back. Yeah.
Thank you. So in instance, I know that for me it's a book launch, but I really wanted to have them share their stories. I think that very often the traditional book launch actually assembles intellectuals. And so what does it mean to actually bring the actual product of the book into the space rather than a bunch of intellectuals, intellectualizing. So, and I'm not dismissing of intellectualism. I am an intellectual, but clearly. So, I'm a book, right? So some of the people's stories I'm going to look at right here. So the questions should bring.
Thank you so much. This is fascinating. I guess anyone can ask this question, but we talked about the significant transformation about in Ghana LGBTQI rights. How did that transformation, for example, just linguistically from men having sex with men to LGBTQI rights shift both the landscape of activism as well as the reflection of self? I'm thinking about Philip Country as an anthropologist who is thinking about identity. So how did it shape landscape as well as self-identity within the space which was the time?
So we would like to see the other question.
Also, another question, so they would answer them in sets. So the second question, yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your experiences. So I'm in religious studies, and I'm curious to know, particularly in light of this bill that is in Parliament, how much does evangelical Christianity play, if a role, if at all, in the engine behind this bill? Because I immediately think about the situation in Uganda, where there were white missionaries, evangelical missionaries, that played a huge part in trying to pass the criminalization of homosexuality in Uganda. And I wonder if that is in a similar context within Ghana.
Yes, you are not far from right. You are really right. Yeah, so let me start with the first question. How the narratives have changed, have shaped the progress. I mean, from the onset, it was gay men or MSM men who are sex with men. And people were just seen as two men having sex with men, and that's it. And when the transmission is on, it is high amongst the male. So they realized that men can have sex with men and not identify as gay or bisexual or transgender or whatever. They can just do it on a spot and go away. Call you the next time, are you gay? No. Yes. So men who have sex with men and other men who have sex with other men, whatever. So that's how the narratives have changed. And I think it has really helped with the struggles because it encompasses now, people see that no, you cannot say MSMs are just these kind of people or gender non-conforming men or whatever. Somebody can be very conforming. My friend would say very conforming genderly, but he is still MSM and can fall in the brackets. So yes, it has really shaped us, it has shaped the narrative positively in the public health spaces. And when it comes to the advocacy spaces as well. Now the class thing, and now people will say, but you gave me, I'm class. Next time, oh, I'm minus. So, and it has really shaped a lot, and then, learning and also exchanging ideas. Nobody can also help that to see. There's a lot of discussion and narratives around advocacy in Ghana. The Christian evangelical, they are the leads. Hallelujah. And we were in Parliament to present our position against the bill. I was there and a few colleagues were there. It was 4 of us there. And before we presented, there was this Assemblies of God, there was Methodist Church. They presented a whole lot of bigotry or bigoted ideas from the Bible and all. They presented a whole lot. They presented on transgenderism or transgenderism, why it's not supposed to be that, why they're supposed to go to jail and all that. And these are Christians. So when we got to our time, we rebutted all the verses. Because down the verse of Leviticus 18, verse 22, which says, a man shall not lie with a man after blood. Beneath it is, you can own slaves, The Pentecost came. Gave him life is 44. He said that you can own a slave provided they don't come from your land. You can inherit them forever and even hand them over to your generation. So we asked them the question, how about that verse? How do you trade your son? How much are you going to sell your son for? And I realized the negative, but we are talking about this. So a man will not lie with a man. What if the man doesn't lie with a man, but stands with the man? Or how about women? How about women lying with other women? Because they are in the bracket LGBTQ plus. How about the class who maybe doesn't lie at all? So in this case, the Bible would not address this particular person. So your arguments are flawed. And then we ask them, is God a man or woman? You are talking about transgender support to jail. Is God a man or woman? Play your submission. They say, oh, God is neutral. He's not a man, he's a gender. How does he identify and all that? And you really believe that everybody should believe in the Bible? Should believe in the Bible, believe in the Bible. If somebody doesn't believe, it is your right to whatever you evangelize. It is not a force or like a permission for the person to take it. So we really dealt with them back and forth, and we really even went to the Bible with them with my tablets and all that, and showed them Israel, this Bethlehem, gay pride. And they're are you sure there's gay pride in there? I said, go online. I've been to Israel, I have been to gay clubs in Israel. Yeah, where Jesus was born, it's there. So stop talking about Jesus and Bethlehem, Jerusalem, and Nazareth and all this. It is there. So it is not the Bible we are talking about. These are people who people's lives. Okay, I don't know, that's a Indian's life or what like that's your problem. The person is saying it's normal, it's not Indian, it's affect. So at the end of the day, some of them even came to us to take our contract. Oh, we are all learning, it's not as if we, and we realized they had not read the bill properly. We realized they didn't even know that we as advocates, we took it as a like war. Like we had war. So we read the bill, we went inside every line, we found counter statement, every line of the bill we found. And we realized that's how come the bill is dead on, like dead forever. It's not going to move anywhere. So from where I think I know very well it's not going to move because even when I get back to Ghana, if it moves, when I get back at the airport, I'm going to jail. So yes, the evangelicals have really led, and I know about Uganda story, I know about Nigeria. They are really, really in the forefront. And in Ghana, they really moved a lot of the traditional movements, the traditional and Islamic bodies along, unlike Uganda, especially the Christian religions and other Christian religions. It is only when there is LGBT issue that you hear of Christian Council Ghana. And they are praying, they have fasting and prayers for you and me. And to get to pray the day out of people. So, and when before they pray, they sing praises and worship, and you can see if you have the technical eyes like myself, the guys singing is one of the prayer people. They look like NTR, like, oh wow. Yeah, so you can see some gender non-conforming people sing before they pray. So I don't know how they really work. I'm a Christian too, but sometimes I sit there to a complete Christian. And all he's talking about is not Christian. Yeah.
Just to add on to your statement, it will interest you to know that they've been able to recruit people that are claiming you have changed.
Yeah.
They were gay and now they are no more gay, and they become that holiest Christian and are preaching all the way. And so the church or Christian as a body will be able
if given the opportunity, to help change these LGBTQs. And so they are really coming in a full force with some amount of evidence to back whatever they are saying. These people have a mental problem. We have measures put in place to help them. Also by trying to criminalize their activities, stopping them from gathering, and not letting them to say or dress the way they want. And so they are coming in full force. And so every now and then, people that have recruited will once in a while come out in the media and show up at TV shows, and will be, revealing and sharing their experiences, how now they are changed and now they are going to the market and preaching and talking about the fact that they are no more, having anything to do with men, and it's quite interesting. And so I would still say that they are not resting. They are still like working behind the scenes. If they show up and say they have this one person that is claiming he has changed, then it's possible for the other two over there to change.
So the ex-gay movement had moved from America to Africa. That's basically it.
Yeah.
What the ex-gay movement in the United States, which has crumbled, is now
Yeah,
thriving.
it's now a phase.
Which is also probably because of what African Americans and you see
Right.
the ex-gay movement right, because of this content. Yeah. So one of that is it's historically also practiced, right? Because one of the things that I can say in the book is the fact that the crumbling of heteronormative marriage, right, then compelled, Euro-American conservatives to look to Africa as a fertile ground for the tilling and the sowing of, heteronormative marriage, right? And so, again, the same thing is being reproduced or recycled in the ex-gay movement, right? Because, Africa has to be the fertile ground for the proliferation of this discourse and the establishment of institutions that actually affirm the legitimacy of the ex-gay, movement.
And then the conversion.
And the conversion therapy and all of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess when they are preaching so hard, the religious bodies are preaching so hard that they are creating hospitals,
Centers.
and centers that will change people. And it's horrific when you speak about those things. How can you put a law before you and ask me to go for conversion therapy that you have created?
That I can be jailed when I show up.
Yes.
So those are also like, alibis, right? So then they are actually going to arrest you. Right? It's not that they are going to convert you, but it's like, this thing that they do to get you to show up and so they can increase the true consequences of the law.
Right, I also want to point out quickly that some of the churches are building prisons, or have built prisons. So the Church of Pentecost has contributed a prison to the state. I don't know whether they own it or the state owns it, but they have built a prison. And so the church has a huge influence when it comes to what should be built, what kind of social services. So they do definitely have some influence. I mean, not even some, quite a church influence. I do want to respond to your question quickly about the sort of shifting of activism and advocacy with the introduction of LGBTQ+. So in 2016, I went to do my dissertation. I actually, of course, learned much about queer theory, LGBT activism, all in the United States. And so really excited I went to my dear friend here, and he helped me recruit folks. And my first question was, well, how do you identify? And that first interview maybe changed my entire question. I had to, call my advisor and say, I have to revise this first question. I realized that the lives of my participants did not fit within the ecological and discursive contours of LGBTQ+. It was just way too, like what he was saying earlier, somebody might say today, or might speak with them about the same sex today, and explore not really. I realized that it wasn't much of an identity. It was much of there was a separation between the community and how folks wanted to live their lives. And so that definitely pushed me to restate how I am deploying LGBTQ plus to describe what my participants were going through or how they were explaining their lives. So that has definitely shifted. Well, of course, the acronym provides a lot of access to international funding, international organizations. So there is a kind of balance right now. But yes, we need access because there is no money we need people coming from the state. But at the same time, it is stifling a kind of queer radical politics that I think needs to happen. And so there is a balance that I believe that some of the human rights organizations are really trying to strike a balance between the two. We need money, but also how can we navigate this space where people's lives don't really fit within the acronym. And so it starts to really actually during my, and I have to go back and read the entire petition from Professor Oates' dissertation at the time to give you some language on how to actually engage with the participants at that time. So yeah, definitely.
I want to quickly share that, like, okay, so it's fascinating you just shared that, thank you, Doctor, because I feel that these terms, when they arrive on the shores of the continent, also get and inhabited differently, right? And so there's the, it gives global legibility, right, to people beyond Ghana, for example, that, oh, there are queer people in the country, but then there's also, in giving legibility, legibility also has that very contradictory thing of producing illegibility, right? So one of the things that I argue or I'm trying to think about is that, like, is this illegible legibility that LGBT insinuates or actually create? And we see this illegible legibility in the reverberations that the appearance of LGBT human rights politics in Ghana has created. Right, so how has a soul person or how are they inhabiting or entering its identity? Right, how and when did they choose to be LGBT? LGBT, as it were, as embodied by all of us in Ghana, does not actually translate as LGBT in the US. Right, and so again, there are these moments of mistranslation and miscomprehensions on the part of local LGBT organizations and international LGBT organizations, right? That in as much as they try to have like a point of, similarity, that is very hard to achieve, and this becomes quite palpable in the field, right? And I think that is where the issue lies. And so Amphibious, right, comes in to really help them navigate, right? This illegible legibility about which I'm trying to talk or refer to, and like they work in LGBT organizations that have actually done so much over the past decade, only to have international LGBT organizations come in and derail all their efforts because of this very problem of the illegible legibility, right? Because these guys are coming and say we are here to help you, but not all help is help. Right? And I think that's what is unfolding, which is that some help come very inimical. And that's why I find it rather than an interesting project where you call it radical. That, you think you're being radically interventive, but then your radicalism is irradical, right? And radicalism shifts and takes on different forms as it moves through time and space. And so for the Sasso whose lives animated, they are doing grassroots work, right? But then there is this idea that they are not Stonewall. They are not Stonewall LGBT, right? They are not like Amphibious LGBT. They are Sasso Ghana LGBT, who of course have been exposed to this global queer iconography, right? But then that doesn't mean they want to reproduce the same iconography in Ghana because it wouldn't work. The Ghanaian context jettisons, transforms, changes LGBT nomenclature generally, right? And I think that's one of the things we are trying to address here.
Yeah. Hello. So I think my question really is one of those questions that I'd like to read the book answer, so I'm going to ask it anyway. So what really resonated with me, when, the sharing their experiences, is I could tell it's a bond that's between all of them, that it's very effective, and I was really taken with that, particularly as it relates to the facility when you mentioned clear fashioning and what that means in the context of basically the impossibility a, of a position, sorry, of an impossible sexuality and what that means for the a subject position, right? And I was kind of wondering what does that mean with, like when the introduction of cyber, I think, Francis, I can't remember the last name, sorry. Yeah, my eyes. When you were saying about like cyber activism and that, I was wondering what is that doing to dynamics of interpersonal communities? It seems to me one of the really beautiful aspects of all of y'all's story is that it really comes through like a self of like the interpersonal and physical in-person relationship, and that's how your activism unfolds. And what has happened with cyber activism, where you do have global queer iconography, you have all other voices and perspectives talking as well with that community. And then I also kind of wonder about younger generations of LGBT individuals with this introduction of social media. What does their community building look like, especially considering there is so much of these possible subjects?
So we'll take your question.
My question really goes along with Sean. And thank you all so much for what you did on the panel. I think both in the composition of the panel and in what you shared, that presence of interpersonal relationships and intimacy is so present. And I'm very curious to hear from you, Professor, to how that emphasis on relationships and intimacy shapes your processes of research and writing, your sense of what it means to be accountable to the communities that you're writing about and that you are also a part of. And that's been echoed by what you all have shared.
Well, I think that what has done and relating to the younger generation and then we call ourselves the older generation. But they call us old.
They call us grandma.
Yeah, the age, now. So, I mean, positively and negatively, I mean, the cyber activism, we really encourage a lot of the young people to advocate virtually or on cyber spaces and all that, social media. And sometimes we realize that some researchers can also, like he said, some help can be unhelpful. And then you can advocate. Your right ends where somebody begins. Don't come and enter my DM or come and enter my Facebook. Hey, gay rights are for everybody. How? So, so what happened was, I don't know, some level of overzealousness. I mean, the person wants Stonewall today. Like, it should happen. Whatever the Christians are talking about, I don't want to go to church again. The next time he wants to tear the Bible apart, he wants to burn the Bible, he wants to do this, he wants to criticize his pastor openly, he wants to criticize the mother, he wants to do this. And you try to, slow them down a bit, let's take it one step at a time. And then, no, you are too old. I mean, this is our generation, we need our rights. And then if the backlashes come, and then we have to go to the police station to still save them. Because, there's this formula for risk. Capacity times stress times something. If you don't have the capacity to withstand the risk, you don't have to do certain things and expose yourself. Like right now, what happened in Ghana, there's a sharp division between the so-called old people and the new generation. We want our rights now. Then we are saying, take your time and get there, build capacity, build allies, build alliances. And they say, no, we want it now. So before you realize, they take a picture of you and put on social media. This is my godmother. But very active. Meanwhile, I haven't told you to go and put my picture on and then the next day I'll be receiving the boy and he just done it. And he does it. And they don't really care. They just want visibility. But visibility minus capacity is a threat. But you can be visible here, and it's like this community where a lot of Muslims can get matcha one day and you want him out of the level. You want to give him some 100 strokes. Why? Oh, because we think he's gay. And his mother cannot stop it. He will bring you out and just give you the lash and go. So if you expose him, or if you out him with your cyber activism, what have you done? You haven't done anything progressive, and that is what we were trying to stop a few of them from. Not when they will say, hey, you don't want us to progress. That much, and everything we have strategies we have. I think Rome wasn't built in a day. And if we read the history of America, the women's rights and every right, they went through stages. They didn't just get us and had the right. But in Ghana now, the younger generation, most of them, they don't even, the bill in parliament, most of them don't even know about it. While we were in parliament fighting, they went to put another picture on Facebook, and it took us like 10 steps back. Whilst we were in parliament fighting the bill, we had a party, an orgy, men wearing G-string and with nails and eyelashes, and they were having a party, like serious, but while the bill was hot, and these guys were arrested at the party, 30 of them. And now, when you're arrested and they have to put you behind the bar, you need to undress and wear something. Now you undress and there's a man wearing G-string, and this one is wearing eyelashes at the police station. And now he have to go there. And you know what they were wearing? This one was wearing G-string, this one was wearing nails, this one had I am dumbfounded. So sometimes they are the younger generation, and they are really on social media doing not just activism, but really taking us back. But when, okay, I think that hits somebody.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for your talk and thank you for your congratulations to you. I was really interested in having a conversation about the differences in the United States and also kind of I guess from my context to in the Caribbean. And something that really struck me with kind of online activism could possibly be this kind of culture that we want kind of have this American kind of regional influence. And so it kind of like this, you guys are like working to kind of get this all kind of right. I think sometimes for kind of the younger generation, we're looking towards kind of like these so-called methods of creating somewhat realizing kind of like what context and cultural kind of like competence can be used when we think about creating from West Africa or kind of like European kind of context. And so I guess is that a part of the levels of activism and advocacy to kind of show them the difference between what kind of progress is using Ghana and kind of like the future that you guys are pushing towards. So even though that they may want X and Y, kind of showing them like this is probably why we can kind of approach it in the same manner as they so.
So since it's such like we are quite surprised. I'll quickly respond to your question, and then Godfrey, you can take that question. Intimacy is critical. I think that's really relevant. We have different, going back to Audrey Lorde, right? Like Audrey Lorde's definition of erotic really somehow informs how I think about intimacy. Intimacy beyond just sexual intimacy. But intimacy is actually very critical, a critical ingredient to relationship building. Emotional, psychological. Godfrey was actually talking about how we would actually converge in Francis' room to build defined community, right? So then in so doing, I find that, queer bodies really try to find intimacy that actually extends or moves beyond sexual intimacy in particular. I mean, given the fact that queer bodies are also always overly sexualized, right? Which is very homophobic, right? So then we have actually been able to fashion, going back to your point of self-fashioning, that as part of the self-fashioning that we enact, that we are doing that in the forms of intimacies that we embody. And of course, sexual intimacy is a fact. I mean, in the field, I always thought about, so I was thinking of Bronislaw Malinowski, right? So we are kind of, at the point I'm like, I'm not a Malinowski kind of anthropologist, who is thinking about sex. No. I mean, because I was aware of the precarious circumstances in which I was, right? And I feel that the men I interviewed brought to me the intimacy that I needed, an intimacy that called on me to see myself in them and to be comfortable with them, right? And I think that became the bedrock of the community for me. So I'll take Godfrey to answer, and then Robert, you answer that question. Answer the question.
Oh, okay. No, so I, in my research, interviewing, having conversations with the older generation, and then the newer generation. So I've learned something or I've kind of encountered something that I think might be able to respond to the question in a way. So about in the spring semester, I was part of another working group where we met with, I was earlier today, with this group in LA who were in touch with the younger generation, the main person. So in our conversations, I talked about how things are a little different now, of course, but it's not like we don't want rights. We're trying to build alliances with specific folks on the ground. And I was even told maybe initially we could go to some ministers' houses. I mean, it's not like the government do not know that we exist. The presidents and the people are aware of these other groups in the country. They're also aware of funding coming to these groups. So if they really want to do something, they could have done it a long time ago. And so it's not like they're not aware. But what I also realized is that it's a kind of liberal sort of strategy, also within the international LGBT sort of circles, where they are disseminating a way of doing activism that doesn't translate into the context that they're doing in Ghana at this point. And so there is, even though they're hearing from Francis and others that, oh, well, let's do things differently, they're getting reinforcement from these other organizations, they mostly based in like LA or Canada or somewhere like that, saying, no, you need to do it the other way. And they give them money too. And so we are giving them money, and the one giving the money is saying, this is the strategy that I want you to take. So there is a slight affirmation of the approach that they're taking that doesn't always reduce the kind of results that we've been doing for over 10 years. So there is a slight affirmation of their tactic, even though it's not necessarily working as well, and it's difficult to convince them otherwise. I think, and so there's a slight tension, not slight, there's a heavy tension right now, but it's difficult because there is an affirmation of what they're doing too.
So particularly, and so we'll leave at 6:30. I'm so sorry. So we went back there. Whoever.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Sarah, and I'm here to the Pastoral College here at the Western Institute. And my question to you all is about the role of privacy. I'm curious to know how this plays and how it shows up. Talking about privacy, you hinted at it a bit in chapter 3, you used the complicit silence in the politics of organization. And I'm curious to know how privacy shows up for all of you. Is privacy a goal in the midst of all of these international organizations and heteronational attempts to meddle and make it impossible to have private life? Does it become a threat? So you mentioned doing this work mistaking other people's lives, right? So privacy then is something that becomes a threat, as a choice to maintain one's privacy and endanger the lives of others. Or is privacy this impossibility in the way that anthropologist Christian Smith talks about impossible privacy in Brazil, or trans queer activists, also Black people living in other. So I'd love to hear you all talk about the
Sure. Adam Dyer. I'm a first-year PhD student in religious studies, and I'm just thrilled to have you all and be exchanged this way. And I'm wondering what, if at all, you think a global Black queer solidarity actually looks like.
So privacy is really a very interesting concept here, right? I do know that in Ghana, there are so many spheres, the public and the private, in the context of, I'm going to speak to Ghana, I'm not going to generalize. In the context of Ghana, these very notions like LGBT, right, come to have they are actually troubled, right? So the very idea of privacy, I think that, if you are queer or such, so people know it's a public secret, to use Michael Tosik's terminology, right? So one of the things I'm trying to say here is that, everybody knows you, so you know, qualifications here, these affirmations, right, tell you that people know. And so what I'm going to say is that what happens when the public secret becomes public knowledge? Because there's a difference between the public secret and the public knowledge, and that is what LGBT human rights interventions do, that they actually bring into the public realm, they actually publicize the secrecy, right? And that is what is happening. The privacy, right? People, that's privacy, but privacy takes on a different manifestation in this particular cultural context. As for the global Black solidarity, I just had my students read Black Pan-Africanism, and especially given the fact that the very idea of the global solidarity complex, if you will, would invite us to reckon in many ways as Black people with the North-South divide, right? And how sometimes being in the North means that you become an arbiter, an ambassador of Northern values, right? And I think I was in Kevin's class earlier on, and Kevin was talking about, on free people who were taken to Liberia, and the fact that they were actually somehow in conflict with the indigenous people. So I think that that's where we need to be we need to think about what we mean by the global, right? What notions of the global are we bringing into this conversation? And if we are talking about the global, are we also going to respect those the vertical, right, differences which are always very complex, because within the vertical there's the horizontal, and within the horizontal there's the vertical, right? And these are the kinds of things that really come up. So solidarity politics is not just like making jollof rice and eating it. It's not as simple as that, but and we know it. We know that within ourselves, that there are all these hierarchies that come in the way. Right? Are we ready to address them in our bid to iron out those differences? And maybe sometimes those differences are needed to make us know how to look at ourselves in relation to power, as category argues. Yes.
It's that when you mentioned about privacy, I think what we do automatically gives you an exposure or like a visibility. So our privacy are sometimes really not ours. I mean, say what you want to say at every point in time. Today, I'm arguing for a gay person or a lesbian person, and the next day I'm in church. And they're like, does it go to church? Or does it do this? So privacy for us it's once you are in there, you know you don't have your privacy. They call us at midnight for police cases and all that. So we really have sold ourselves out to what we do. And when it comes to the health intervention, we term it as confidentiality. where what he spoke about, he wouldn't mention anything when it comes to HIV fetus and whatever we call it, and keep that confidential information about that. It's very, very taboo. But our privacy, I mean, why do you do HIV? Yeah, maybe it's even HIV vaccine because you are. Okay, the second one was the global black solidarity. I mean, like he said, not all help are help. Yeah, so when it comes to some interventions we do, we study racism, we study racism in those interventions, and when we transport them back home, we don't have racism. We have tribalism, like people from the south and north and all that. This person is from north. This one too is he a person? We are talking. We the southerners are talking. You from the north. So we see it in different shapes, and like Kwame said, we see it in different shapes. So if like we are addressing racism in Ghana, we would tell it as tribalism and not racism. Because and then even if we call everybody Ogoni, like my sister, you call it white, you call it white man, white woman. One the color one side, so if some group of people from the global south or whatever say they are coming to do this or that, oh, we are supporting you, like you said, some people from LA, we support you. We are black community and whatever. Your blackness in Toronto is seen as white. It's seen as pink, somewhere, it's seen as whatever. So the ideology change from one place to the other. So we have to be very strategic when they limit solidarity in terms of color.
Sure, and it must be very quick because this is keeping us from the food and drink. That's obviously, it must be quick. But for those, it's a new book, and so for those who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, I wonder if you could share with the audience a couple of things that are in it. First, this very evocative story that you tell when you come back to Accra, 4 years away, to the airport, and you see a sign that starts with a welcoming, but then details all the ways that you were not welcome. That's the first. Yes, and then to talk a bit more about the importance of the philosophical concepts in the development of the idea of ambiguousness. Then, I'm adding things because it's so evocative, and I hope that it encourages people to read first, to buy the book, and perhaps to decide. Okay, that's an agreement. That's a promise. Okay. All right. So you evoke Du Bois's problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line, and you go further to say the problem of the 21st century is the problem of the queer line in Africa. And I'm wondering if you are being specific in Jamestown, and specific in another way for Ghana, and specific in another way for Africa. But is it, to this point, the problem of the 21st century, the problem of the queer line globally, would you say? And then last, can you talk about how your book queers queer African studies?
So, I mean, I started this project in 2000. I'm just going to read that to answer the question. On the very first page, following a 4-year spell in the United States pursuing a graduate degree in upstate New York, I returned to Ghana in June 2011 to conduct an anthropological project on the taboo subject of homosexuality. After disembarking from the plane at Ghana's Kotika International Airport, the international gateway for air travel, I started quickly across the tarmac to escape what is leading to riding from the asphalt. Like other travelers, I was greeted in the arrival hall by a poster hanging in a silver frame. Behind the immigration post where arriving passengers underwent entry formalities. The sign reads, and this is the sign, "Welcome, Akwa." Akwa is in the English, the Akan version of welcome. Ghana warmly welcomes all visitors of goodwill. Ghana does not welcome pedophiles and other sexual deviants. And that's a record. Indeed, Ghana imposes extremely harsh penalties on such sexually aberrant behavior. If you are in Ghana for such activity, then for everybody's good, including your own, we suggest you go elsewhere. So this is how I introduce the lecture, just to get a sense of how the nation state produces sexuality
right? And whatever it is calling sexual deviance, but also how it actually positions sexual deviance out of itself. As if to say that the deviants are not in, that they're all coming out, and so we are pure. This is like a kind of ethno-nationalist logic that is fueling this particular, rhetoric or idea. So I mean, I arrive in Ghana and I see this and I'm like, oh my God, like, is this really what's happening? And so I arrived and remember I had a long then, and of course, I was in my very cool day queer apparel. And as I was making my way through the immigration system, I found just with by your body. Right, and so in that instance, I'm actually becoming amphibious. I am becoming straight. I have to chest out. I don't have a chest. I have to act like a man, right, in context. And for me, that somehow anticipated how I came to this piece. But this book was not going to be called Amphibious. It was called Reluctantly Queer. Right, I had begun this project with reluctance, and I wanted to think about the ways in which my own reluctance to be queer, right, might be worthy of exploring. And then when I went to do further fieldwork out and studied them, I realized that reluctance was too personal, and perhaps my own personal experience was going to overshadow what the field was giving me. So the field then had to transform how I was viewing the chapter. That's shifting from reluctance to amphibious, right? That's the title of it. To your question, I think the fellowship program, that's why the Muslim fellowship program is amazing. I had Xavier Lieberman come to workshop my paper in my first year. And Xavier, when we go in grads, we go to all these places and you're obsessed, especially when you're in anthropology, you're obsessed with white theories. And Xavier comes in and Xavier is like, why are you using these people? And so Xavier's like, why? Africa is a fertile place. Teeming with intellectuals and philosophers who have done the work. They do not have to be queer, but then they have frameworks, theoretical and otherwise, that can help you think about what you're doing, right? And so immediately I'm like, damn, wow, I'm in lab studies, and I have to leave Duluth and Guachari behind. And meet African philosophy. And in African philosophy, which was American, I'm like, Kwame Jechi had already been talking about personhood. And the ways in which in Akan ontology, we moved back and forth because he was critiquing Eurocentric conceptualizations of African subjectivity as overly communalistic. And Jechi saying that no, we are actually not just communalistic, we are also very individual. And that our coming into being is really reliant on the vacillation of the self, between the self and the community. That is what shapes the point. So I think and I'm really pleased. African philosophy is waiting to be touched. Now I do not mean go and extract. Don't be extractivist, but judicious, right? And the queer line. I think the queer line, I'm specifically writing about Ghana. It could be applied in the US, but it could have a different iteration. And especially in the US, where we are witnessing spate of trans murders, we could also literally see the queer line here for queer people of color, queer trans people. Right, but in Ghana, it takes on a different shape. Right, and like Kakra is saying, if we have tribalism in Ghana, Du Boisian color line could take on a different iteration in Ghana. So I think the problem with the queer line here, 21st century problem, is specific to this project, although I see it having wider applicability.